My spoiled sister ruined my birthday by dumping a drink all over my dress. She said it was too fancy, and I didn't need to show off. My name is Elena Ward, I'm 26, and I don't usually treat myself too much. I've always been careful with money, careful with what I buy, careful with how I live. For once, though, I wanted my birthday to feel special. I had worked overtime shifts for months and finally bought a dress that made me feel proud. Soft fabric that hugged me just right, a color I knew flattered me, something I could walk into a room wearing and not feel invisible. I rented a small banquet hall for the dinner. It wasn't extravagant, but it felt warm. Candles on the tables, a little music in the background, family gathered around. For me, that was enough. I was excited, nervous even, because for once I had allowed myself to step into the spotlight. Then there was Marissa, my younger sister, 23, the type who could never stand to see anyone else take up space. She had always been spoiled, our parents' favorite, the one who could get away with anything. She didn't have to work hard, not the way I did, because someone was always handing her what she wanted. She walked in late, of course, wearing a flashy dress of her own, like she wanted to make sure people noticed her instead of me. I tried to let it go. I tried to focus on the food, the laughter, the birthday cake waiting in the back. For a moment, I felt light. I felt like maybe this night could be mine. Then Marissa picked up a glass of red wine. She leaned in close while everyone was talking, and before I could react, the wine poured down the front of my dress. Dark stains spread across the fabric I had saved so long to buy. Gasps went around the table, but Marissa just tilted her head, smiling that smug little smile she always wore. "Oh, Elena," she said, pretending it was clumsy. "Maybe next time you won't wear something so fancy. You don't need to show off like that." The room went quiet for a second, and then laughter. Not cruel, maybe, but careless. My uncle chuckled. My mother waved it off, saying, "Accidents happen." People went back to their food, back to their conversations, as if nothing had happened. But it wasn't nothing. I sat there with my dress ruined, my face burning, my stomach twisted into knots. I could still hear her words, "You don't need to show off." She wanted me small, embarrassed, tucked back in the corner where I'd always been. Everyone else laughed it off. Everyone else moved on. But I couldn't. In that moment, I knew something had cracked between us, something that wouldn't be fixed with a napkin or an apology that would never come. Growing up in my family always felt like living in someone else's shadow. From the time we were little, Marissa was the center of attention. If she cried, everyone rushed to her. If she broke something, someone else got blamed. If I cried, I was told to toughen up. My mom, Donna, always said, "She's the baby, she doesn't know better." And my dad, Harold, never argued. He just stayed quiet, letting things slide. That silence said more than words. It meant Marissa could do whatever she wanted without consequence. I was expected to be the mature one. If I got good grades, it was, of course, Elena always does well. If I wanted something new, I was told to wait until Christmas or my birthday. But if Marissa wanted something, she usually had it in her hands before the week was over. I learned early not to expect much, at least not from them. There were moments burned into my memory, like the night of prom. I had saved for weeks to buy a soft blue dress that felt like a dream to me. The morning of prom, I found it hanging in my closet with a long rip down the side. The zipper was broken too, like someone had yanked it until it snapped. Marissa swore she had nothing to do with it, and my mom said she wouldn't do something like that. I ended up borrowing a dress that didn't fit right, while Marissa smiled through the photos. Another time, in college, I won a scholarship that required me to give a short thank you speech. I worked on it for days, nervous but proud. The night before, Marissa found my notes. She stood in the kitchen and read them out loud like a performance, mocking my words and changing them into jokes. The next day, when I gave my real speech, I felt exposed, like her laughter was echoing in the back of my... She later told people she had helped me practice. Everyone believed her. Looking back at the red wine running down my birthday dress, I realized it fit the same pattern. It wasn't clumsy. It wasn't an accident. It was just another way for her to cut me down and smile while she did it. I knew then that this wasn't something I could brush off. If I let it go, she would keep going, finding new ways to humiliate me, new ways to keep me in the corner while she took the spotlight. But I also knew revenge couldn't be small. Throwing a drink back in her face or shouting across the table would only make me look foolish. If I was going to do something, it had to matter. It had to leave her stunned the way I had been stunned. It had to hurt her the way she had spent years hurting me. For the first time, I started to wonder not if I would get back at her, but how. After the wine hit my dress, I forced a smile and tried to stay calm, but inside I was shaking. The fabric clung to me, heavy and sticky, and the dark stain spread in a way that made it impossible to hide. I excused myself quietly, pretending I just needed a moment, and slipped into the bathroom down the hall. The bright lights made it worse. I could see how badly the dress was ruined. No matter how many paper towels I pressed into the fabric, the red only smeared deeper. I tried soap, water, anything I could find, but the stain refused to fade. It was like the dress was marked forever, the same way I felt marked by her smirk. From the bathroom stall, I could hear the muffled sound of music drifting from the hall. I heard laughter too, sharp bursts that carried through the walls. I knew exactly whose voice was rising above the others. Marissa was out there, moving into the spotlight like she always did. She was probably spinning in her dress, holding her glass high, making jokes, making sure people looked at her instead of noticing that the birthday girl was missing. I sat down on the closed lid of the toilet, my hands pressed into my lap, my chest tight. The dress clung to my legs, still damp, and the smell of wine rose up in waves. My throat burned, and before I knew it, tears started sliding down my cheeks. I hated crying like that, alone and hidden, but it felt like everything inside me was pouring out just like the wine had. Minutes passed, maybe more. I wasn't keeping track anymore. I just wanted to disappear. That's when the bathroom door creaked open and footsteps echoed on the tile floor. A voice called softly, "Elena?" It was my cousin Travis Bennett. He was a few years older than me, the one cousin I actually trusted. He had always seen through Marissa's little game. He tapped on the stall door gently and said, "Hey, it's me. You okay?" I unlocked the door, and when he saw my face, he didn't laugh or brush it off the way everyone else had. He just looked at the ruined dress, then at me, and shook his head slowly. "She did that on purpose, didn't she?" I didn't even answer. I didn't need to. He already knew. Travis crouched a little so we were eye level. His voice was calm, but there was a sharp edge in it. "You've been putting up with this too long. Since we were kids, she's been getting away with everything. You can't just let her keep doing this." His words hit hard, like he had said something I had been afraid to admit out loud. My tears slowed, and I felt something else stirring under the shame, something hotter, sharper. Travis stood and put a hand on my shoulder. "Do something about it, Elena. Don't let her win every time." After he left, I stayed there in the stall for a long moment, staring at the ruined fabric in my lap. The wine had left a permanent mark, but maybe it was more than that. Maybe it was the mark of a line finally crossed. In that quiet bathroom, with the sound of Marissa's laughter echoing faintly through the walls, the first real thought of revenge took root in my mind. In the days after my birthday, I couldn't stop seeing that smirk on Marissa's face. Every time I tried to focus on work or even just making dinner, it came back to me, the way her lips curled, the glint in her eyes when the wine hit my dress. It wasn't just a mistake. It was satisfaction. She enjoyed watching me crumble, enjoyed stealing the one moment that should have been mine. I waited for some kind of call, maybe even a weak apology, but none came. My mom called once, but only to say, "You shouldn't let little things upset you so much. It's not worth it." My dad didn't say a word at all. I knew then what I had always known. No one was going to hold Marissa responsible. They never had. If I complained, I'd be told to be the bigger person. If I stayed quiet, she got away with it anyway. Either way, she won. But this time felt different. Something in me hardened. I realized I couldn't keep living with this constant cycle, her cruelty, my silence, and the family's excuses. If I wanted things to change, I had to make it happen myself. And not by yelling, not by throwing her insults back at her, because those would fade. I needed to do something she couldn't laugh off, something she couldn't twist into a joke. I wanted everyone to see her for who she really was. That's when I began paying closer attention. I noticed things I had once brushed off. She borrowed money from cousins and never paid it back. She forgot to return clothes she had taken from friends. She bragged about favors she never actually did, or told lies to make herself sound more important. Little things, but together they painted a picture of someone careless, selfish, and mean. I started writing things down. Dates, amounts, names. I tucked away receipts, notes, even small screenshots of messages she had left on the family computer when she forgot to log out. I didn't plan to use them right away. I knew timing would matter. If I came at her too soon, she'd twist the story, make me look bitter. But if I waited for the right moment, when she was basking in attention, then the truth would cut deep. At night, when I lay in bed, I imagined how it would feel. Not just getting even, but finally breaking the spell she had over everyone. I didn't want her hurt physically, and I didn't even want her gone from my life completely. What I wanted was for people to stop treating her like she was untouchable. I wanted the mask to come off in front of everyone who had believed her lies. The thought settled into me slowly, like a seed planting itself deeper every day. I didn't know exactly when or how I'd use what I was collecting, but I knew one thing for certain: the moment would come. And when it did, Marissa wouldn't be able to laugh it off. When the news of Marissa's engagement spread through the family, it was treated like the best thing that had ever happened. She made the announcement over dinner one Sunday, flashing her hand in the air before anyone even sat down. The diamonds sparkled under the lights, and gasps went around the table. Everyone leaned closer, touching her hand, asking for details. My mom nearly cried, saying, "You deserve this, sweetheart." My dad beamed like he had personally arranged the whole thing. His name was Colton Myers, 29, steady job, polite manners, the kind of man my parents always hoped one of us would marry. I watched him sit there with a calm smile as everyone praised her, and for a moment I wondered if maybe he didn't see her the way I did. Or maybe he just didn't want to. The ring was another sore point. She bragged about how she and Colton had picked it out together, how she had paid for part of it, how it showed her mature side. The way she said it made me grit my teeth. I knew Marissa, and maturity was the last word that belonged to her. Still, nobody questioned her. They nodded wide-eyed, as if she had climbed a mountain by buying part of her own jewelry. I sat there, watching the scene, and something sank in. After everything she had done, the lies, the sabotage, the cruelty, she was being rewarded. Not just with a man who adored her, but with the applause and pride of the entire family. For years I had been told to let things go, but here she was climbing higher because of the very behavior everyone ignored. It felt like betrayal all over again, only worse this time. Still, I couldn't ignore what I saw between her and Colton when the attention wasn't on them. He would reach for her hand, and she would let him, but her eyes rolled slightly, as if it bored her. When he told a story, she cut him off, correcting small details just to make herself sound smarter. At one point, she leaned over and whispered something to him that made his face go tight for a moment before he forced a smile. To everyone else, they looked perfect, but I caught those cracks. I saw the way she treated him like a trophy she could show off, not a partner she respected. And I knew deep down that this was her new stage. She wasn't just trying to shine brighter than me anymore. She wanted to shine brighter than anyone. As I watched her lean into him for a photo, the diamond catching the light again, a new thought formed. If there was anyone who deserved to see her true self, it was him. If I could show Colton the real Marissa, the selfishness, the cruelty, the way she used people, her perfect little image would fall apart. The first chance to test my plan came at another family dinner a few weeks after the engagement. Everyone was gathered at my parents' house, the table crowded with dishes, the air buzzing with chatter. As usual, Marissa was holding court, leaning back in her chair with her ring sparkling under the chandelier. She waved her hand around whenever she talked, making sure no one could miss it. She started telling the story of the ring again, the same one she had already repeated half a dozen times. "Colton and I picked it out together," she said proudly. "I even chipped in for part of it. I wanted to contribute, to show that I can handle things like this myself." Everyone nodded like they were impressed. My mom clasped her hands together and said, "That's my girl. Always so independent." I kept my eyes on my plate, pretending to be casual. Then, as if it just slipped out, I said, "That's interesting, because I thought Colton paid for it." I glanced up with a small smile, like I was simply confused and wanted to be corrected. The table went quiet for a second. Colton shifted in his chair, his eyes flicking toward Marissa. She let out a quick laugh that sounded a little too sharp. "Well, yes, technically he paid for it, but I helped with some other costs around the same time. It's the same thing." I didn't argue. I just nodded slowly and went back to cutting my food. The silence broke, and conversation moved on, but the air had changed. I saw the flash in her eyes, the way her shoulders stiffened. She knew what I was doing, even if no one else did. What mattered most was Colton's reaction. He didn't speak up, but I noticed the way he studied her after that, quiet and thoughtful. It was subtle, but it was there. He had heard the difference between her story and the truth. He wasn't going to forget it. Later, when she tried to steer the conversation back to herself, bragging about how organized she was with the wedding planning, I could see him looking down at his plate, almost like he was hiding a reaction. It was a small crack, but I saw it clearly. The rest of the family ignored the tension. They laughed at her jokes, praised her plans, acted like nothing had happened. But that didn't bother me anymore. They were blind by choice. What mattered was that Colton wasn't blind. He had seen it, even if he didn't say anything. That night, as I drove home, I replayed the dinner in my head. It hadn't been a big blow, just a tiny slip in her mask, but it was enough. She was used to being untouchable, but now I had proof she could be exposed. And I knew this was only the beginning. When Marissa asked me to be her maid of honor, I almost laughed out loud. She stood there, holding her ring up like always, and said, "Of course it has to be you. Who else would I trust?" Her tone was sugary sweet, but I knew the real reason. She didn't want me shining anywhere near her big day. She wanted me under her thumb, fetching, carrying, smiling on cue. I swallowed my bitterness and nodded, pretending to be honored. "Of course, I'd love to," I said, forcing warmth into my voice. Inside, though, I felt something sharper than agreement. If she wanted me close, I'd stay close, but for my reasons, not hers. Being maid of honor meant access. I was in every meeting, every call, every rehearsal. I saw the way she treated people when she thought no one important was watching. At the bakery, when the cake decorator showed her samples, Marissa sneered and said, "Do you not understand what elegant looks like?" I said classy, not cheap. At the dress shop, when her bridesmaids tried on gowns, she made cruel comments under her breath. "She looks like a stuffed sausage," or "that color makes her look washed out." They laughed nervously, trying to brush it off, but I saw the hurt in their faces. Vendors dreaded her calls. She barked orders like a boss, changing details at the last minute and refusing to pay extra, claiming she was being overcharged. She made lists of gifts she expected from people, even circling the expensive ones in magazines and leaving them on her dresser by accident. Every bit of it showed who she really was: selfish, arrogant, and cruel. I kept my expression neutral, nodding when she bragged, smiling when she gloated. But behind the scenes, I started collecting. I saved receipts, copied invoices, wrote down the names of vendors she insulted. I even kept track of times she belittled Colton, whispering nasty comments when he tried to help. I made sure everything was neat and organized, tucked away where she'd never think to look. The more I saw, the clearer it became. She wasn't just planning a wedding. She was building a stage, one where she could stand at the center and bask in everyone's applause. She wanted it perfect, not because of love, but because it meant she'd won again. Everyone would look at her and say, "Marissa is amazing. Marissa is glowing. Marissa deserves this." But I knew something she didn't. I knew the same wedding she thought would crown her could just as easily destroy her. Every cruel word, every lie, every selfish demand, it was all ammunition now, and I was holding it quietly, waiting. As the big day drew closer, I stopped feeling nervous. Instead, I felt steady, focused. I knew where this was headed. The wedding wasn't going to be her perfect moment. It was going to be the place where everyone finally saw her for who she really was. The night of the rehearsal dinner, the room was warm with laughter and the clinking of glasses. Tables were set neatly, and Colton's family filled the room along with ours. Everyone seemed excited, talking about the big day ahead. I stayed quiet, watching Marissa float from table to table, her voice loud and full of fake charm. She was in her element, soaking up every compliment like it was sunlight. When she finally turned her attention to me, her smile sharpened. She leaned close enough for others nearby to hear and said, "Elena, make sure you wear something simple tomorrow. You always try too hard, and it'd be a shame if you distracted from my big moment." A few people chuckled nervously. I just nodded, keeping my face calm. Inside, though, I felt a cold steadiness. She thought she had won again, but she had no idea what was waiting for her. Later in the evening, after everyone had eaten, it was time for toasts. People spoke about love, family, and the excitement of the wedding. Then it was my turn. I stood, holding my glass, pretending to clear my throat nervously. Marissa gave me that same smug look she always gave when she expected me to stay small and sweet. I started softly, like I was going to give the usual glowing speech. But then I said, "Since we're all here to celebrate truth and commitment, I think it's only fair that we also speak honestly." The room went quiet. Marissa's smile faltered. I began telling stories, not the warm ones people expected, but the real one. I spoke about the time she destroyed my prom dress, the time she mocked my scholarship speech, the way she borrowed money and never returned it. I didn't raise my voice, but each word landed heavy. Marissa's face went pale, then red. She tried to cut me off, laughing too loudly, saying, "She's just joking." But I didn't stop. I pulled out papers from my bag, receipts showing money she owed people, copies of emails where she insulted vendors, lists she had written of gifts she demanded from friends. I laid them out on the table like evidence in a trial. "This isn't jealousy," I said firmly. "This is who she is. Selfish, cruel, and everyone in this room deserves to know the truth before tomorrow." The silence was thick. Colton's parents exchanged looks, their smiles gone. Colton himself stared at the papers, then at Marissa, his expression tightening with each second. Marissa sputtered, reaching for excuses. "Those are taken out of context. She's twisting everything. She's just bitter." But the more she talked, the more desperate she sounded. I stood tall, calm, unshaken. For once, I wasn't the one humiliated. I wasn't the one crying in a bathroom stall. I had turned the spotlight onto her, and she couldn't squirm out of it. The room froze after I finished speaking. Forks rested on plates, glasses sat untouched, and no one dared to break the silence. All the cheerful energy that had filled the dinner just moments before vanished. Colton's parents stared at Marissa like they were seeing her for the very first time. My mom shifted in her chair, her smile trembling, while my dad kept his eyes fixed on the table. Colton stood up slowly, his jaw tight. He didn't yell, but his voice cut through the air. "Marissa, can we talk? Now." He didn't wait for her to answer. He grabbed her arm gently but firmly and led her out of the dining room. Everyone turned to watch as the two of them disappeared down the hallway. The murmurs started almost immediately, soft whispers rolling through the crowd. I stayed quiet, my hands resting on the papers I had set down, waiting. A few minutes later, the sound of raised voices came from the other room. Marissa's words carried clearly. She's lying. She's always been jealous of me. You can't listen to her, Colton. She wants to ruin this for us. Then came Colton's voice, louder, sharper. Jealous? These are your words, Marissa. These messages are from you. You mocked me to your friends, laughed about how you could get me to pay for everything. Do you think I'm blind? The room grew still again. My chest tightened as I listened. Marissa stormed back in, her face flushed. She pointed at me like I was the villain. She planted this. She twisted it all to make me look bad. I stood calm and opened another folder. Here are the bank transfers, I said clearly. All from Colton's account. And here are screenshots of texts you left open on the family computer. No one forced you to write these things. Colton walked in behind her, his face pale but firm. He glanced at the papers, then at Marissa. I wanted to believe you, he said quietly. But it's all here. Every time I doubted, I pushed it aside. Not anymore. He slipped the ring from her finger and set it on the table. The sound of it hitting the wood was sharp, final. It's over, Marissa. Gasps filled the room. My aunt covered her mouth. My mom's eyes darted from me to Marissa, as if she couldn't process what had just happened. My dad finally spoke, his voice low. Enough, Marissa. For the first time, the truth couldn't be hidden. The family looked at her with shame, not admiration. They looked at me differently too, like they finally understood what I had carried all these years. Marissa's face twisted with rage. She slammed her hands on the table and shouted, "You're a jealous loser, Elena. You've always been jealous of me. That's all this is." Her voice cracked as she spoke, but her words carried through the whole room. Some guests shifted uncomfortably. Others stared down at their plates, wishing they were anywhere else. Colton didn't even flinch. He picked up his coat, gave one last look at her, and said, "I don't know who you are anymore. Or maybe I do, and I just didn't want to see it." With that, he walked out of the room, his parents following right behind him. Chairs scraped against the floor as other guests stood, whispering to each other, making quick exits. The celebration had collapsed into nothing. Marissa kept yelling, but her voice grew smaller as the room emptied. She set me up. None of this is true. She stomped her foot like a child, tears smearing her makeup. But no one was listening anymore. The wedding was as good as gone, and she knew it. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like the small, quiet sister in the corner. I didn't feel like the one who had to swallow her pain just to keep the peace. I felt steady, like I had finally taken my place in the room. I didn't need to raise my voice or argue back. The truth had spoken loud enough. When most of the guests were gone, my parents stayed behind, both looking pale and stiff. My mom shook her head at me, her voice sharp but trembling. "You didn't have to do this here. You embarrassed the whole family." My dad sighed, rubbing his forehead. "You could have handled it differently. She's still your sister." I looked at them, calm in a way I had never been before. "She's been embarrassing me my whole life, and you never cared. You let her treat me like garbage and told me to let it go. I'm done with that. I'm not your scapegoat anymore." My mom opened her mouth like she wanted to argue, but no words came out. My dad just dropped his gaze, unable to meet my eyes. I turned to leave. Marissa was slumped in a chair now, muttering insults under her breath. Mascara streaked down her face. For once, I didn't feel the urge to defend myself or to hope she would change. She wasn't my problem anymore. As I walked out of the hall and into the cool night air, I felt lighter than I had in years. The wedding was ruined, the mask was gone, and so was the hold she had over me. I wasn't walking away just from Marissa. I was walking away from every moment of betrayal, every lie I'd been forced to swallow, every time I'd been told to stay quiet. For the first time in my life, I wasn't just free, I was in control.